When it comes to having a lot of things you're passionate about, the main issue is just how many things should you try to get good at. You may believe the common myth that if you try too many things, then you won't be good at any of them, but that's not true at all. Well, I'm going to show you my method of what really worked for me as far as getting lasting results in multiple areas, and hopefully you can draw some experience from that and cater it to your life. So I'll start by saying that, in my opinion, it's better to be good at a lot of things by going at them one at a time. That's how I got where I am, and I'm going to explain why this is really important, especially if you're like me and you tend to get really excited and just want to jump into everything right away. It's important to take things one at a time and really focus deeply on those. It's not a bad thing that you have all this excitement and this extra energy to just dive into things that you really want to do. But the problem with diving into too many things at once is that you have a limited amount of focus that you're able to apply, and you don't have momentum. But I'm gonna get into that in a second. To start though, as far as selecting a hobby, let's assume you've cleared out everything in your life that tends to get in the way. Distractions, bad habits, and so on. What would occupy your mind the most? And if you can actually think of something, this is probably where you should start. That could be art, that could be guitar and piano, that could be sports. Maybe you're into sculpting. I read some comments from the last video. Some of you are also into the things that I'm in, which is cool. Photography, different fields of tech, graphic design, things like that. What would it be for you though? And I would say whatever that is, that's where you should start. You could also think of this as, if you were known for something, what would that be? So in my case, I would want people to say, oh, that's Vaughn, the piano and guitar player. So that is what occupies my mind the most. Whatever that is for you though, I would highly recommend that's where you start. So why one at a time? What's the purpose of one at a time? Reason number one is focus. I would say focus is the most important thing when it comes to getting good at multiple things, or just one thing really. If you don't have focus, you really don't have anything else. And if your focus is really bad, you can develop it to be really good over time. I've been at a point where my focus was great, it got really bad, and now it's great again. So I know both sides of it. You can absolutely build it up, but this is the one thing that's going to actually get you good in whatever area you try to apply yourself to. Especially because we all have life happening around us. You have work, school, family, other obligations that you have to take care of. If you don't have the focus to actually put in onto something that you want to do when you're not dealing with those other things, you won't really get the results. So this is why it's important to focus on one thing at a time. There's probably times in your life, if you're like me, where you've tried to do too many things at once and you just kind of abandon them all at the same time. This is exactly what I've done before. And also another reason why I think this focus aspect is probably the most important thing here. Also, this focus is going to help you drastically improve in this one area. And you're probably gonna get good a lot faster than you think. Reason number two, and this is kind of a cheat code to life in general, but it's something I call the confidence snowball. So when you get good at something, whatever that thing you had in your mind, when you get good at that, the next skill you pick up, your ability and belief in yourself, as far as your ability to pick up a skill, get through the days you don't want to show up, the discipline, the focus, all that, your ability in those areas is actually going to carry over to the next thing you do, even if it's not connected. I'll use myself for an example. I started out just playing guitar. This was in high school. I didn't do sports, no languages, nothing. I'll put a picture of myself on the screen, but I basically was into video games and playing guitar. The first thing I learned outside of that was kickboxing. And these are two completely different areas. You know, video games and guitar over to kickboxing is kind of a drastic change. But something I noticed is that as I went to practice, as I would show up, as I would spar, a lot of the confidence I had came from the fact that I had done this before. I had gotten through those tough days on guitar, or those days where I really didn't feel like showing up. Those days, I can't really explain it, but it really set something inside of me to where I was able to transfer that ability over just fine. Considering I was in Japan during this time, I started learning Japanese after this. And now I had the confidence from learning guitar and learning kickboxing to apply to the language, which I really needed because Japanese was the first language that I learned outside of English, which is really hard for an English speaker. And I really, really noticed that though these fields are completely unrelated, the confidence from the first bled into the second and into the next. And even after Japanese, into software engineering and other things that I do, piano, and a list of other things. It continuously builds up my confidence and my ability to just do this a lot better, a lot smoother. I really think without the prior hobbies, some of these things I would have quit on, especially kickboxing, MMA in general. It's very hard, but the fact that I could get to levels in those other areas that other people couldn't, maybe not in a competition sense, but you know what I mean. That gave me the confidence in knowing, hey, if I stick with this, just like the tough times and those other tasks, I'll be able to get through this too and get to that level that I want to be at. I bring all this up to say, as you develop in one area and you're focusing on that one thing, it's really going to build your skill developing skill. I don't know if that sentence makes sense. Your skill developing skill, your ability to develop new skills. It's going to build that up, so everything you pick up past that first thing or that second thing is actually going to come a lot easier, even if it's not related. Now we're going to talk about max capacity. This is really the big question I get from people who see my channel or just know me in real life. How many is too much, or how many should you get? This will be different for everyone. Of course, that's the blanket answer. But I do want to say, this is probably going to be a lot more than you actually think. And I'll explain that in a minute. I personally did not think at all that I would be able to do everything that I do today and actually keep up with it about 7-10 years ago. I had no idea I would be doing what I do now. And you probably will be in the same position yourself. Maybe in a shorter amount of time, I don't know. But you're probably going to have that same realization like I did. And even now, I'm still kind of confused at my own life. And I live my own life every day. But I'm really grateful to be here and give you guys the information so that you can kind of do the same thing. Because it really is a good feeling when you're skilled in all the things that are in your mind and you're not just kind of wishing that you had results anymore. So to tackle this max capacity thing, I want to bring up a image that I have in my head, and I think of an ambient light, like a light that's just kind of lights up the whole room, but then you take that and you put it into a laser beam and you point it at one area. I tend to see this as our energy and our focus throughout the day. And this is what really made it click for me as far as developing all these areas. And how I really got to this realization was video games. Growing up, I used to play video games all day. Literally, if you left me in my room from sunup to sundown, I could be on the Xbox, the GameCube, whatever. Super Smash Bros, fighting games, Halo, Gears of War, all that stuff. I would just switch from game to game and I could play nonstop. I didn't have to eat. I barely drink water, barely moved. I just played video games. That's it. My logic was this. If I could sit there and play video games all day, no breaks, maybe one break to go, I don't know, get a drink of water just so I could play more games, why can't I apply that to other things? That really came into play when I was in the military because I worked a lot. We deployed, we did all kinds of stuff. In the off time, I'd say, well, I used to play games after school, and why can't I just do this now? Why can't I just play guitar when I get off work, even though I'm tired or whatever? And thinking about this, I don't know if it tricked my brain or my body just started to believe me or whatever. Again, this is all just my experience. I noticed that I was actually able to do way more than I thought. This continued to bleed over when I got out of the military and I was living in Japan as a civilian, because I would go to school and go to college there, and then I would get off and I would still do other things, still go to practice, and I could keep it up. And the whole time I was thinking to myself, remember, you used to play video games for 12 hours a day, so just divide those 12 hours into productive things. I hope this is making sense. Let me know if it's not. I can maybe articulate it better. But it's like, I don't want to say energy transfer, but maybe that's the word to use. I'm transferring that idea of me being able to play something all day or do something all day, even longer than 12 hours sometimes, into more productive tasks. I say that to say, figure out what you can do for a long time. Maybe it's a combination of things. Maybe you can binge Netflix while scrolling social media, or also playing video games, or you're on YouTube all day, think about that and how that is easily accessible and easy for you to do. And as you start to pick up these things, try to attribute that to what you're trying to learn. I don't know if this works. Again, I don't have science, I don't have studies, I don't have bar charts or any of that. I just know in my experience, this was something that really helped me out. Now, I'm not saying detached from life. That's not what I'm saying, where you're just inside all day and you stop being in touch with reality. All I'm saying is that most days you want to limit that, severely limit it or cut it off, and just put that energy into something else. Because again, the ambient light to laser, it's really the same light. It's the same amount of light. It's just got to go somewhere rather than being spread out into different areas for no reason. Okay, along the lines of max capacity, when should you add on another hobby or interest? Again, the answer is kind of a blanket answer. Everyone's different. But I would really say pay attention to when you're not finding it a struggle to show up. That is one huge indicator, I would say. And another one is once you develop some sort of competency in that area. Put more importance on the ability of showing up, though. I believe this is the key, because competence is a ever-changing goal in my opinion. But the ability to show up is something that you can gauge right away. Another way to find this out is if you feel weird while going a few days without it. That's another indicator that it's pretty much attached to you at that point. I remember personally for MMA, in my sense, or mostly kickboxing, but when COVID happened, I was in Japan and most of the gyms shut down, and for a while there was no lockdown rule, but places with close quarters like that kind of just had to stop and everything was shutting down early. So for me, I noticed, I think about 3-4 days in, I was literally kind of scrambling. Like I didn't know what to do because I hadn't sparred anyone, I hadn't trained with anyone. It sounds weird, but when you're not consistently fighting other people, at least for me, I feel strange. Only in the gym, by the way, not on the streets, no violence. But when I'm not training like that, it does feel weird. And I noticed that's because I was really attached to it. The same thing goes for guitar. If I go a few days without playing guitar or piano, it starts to feel strange. So I say this for you to say, if you start to feel that feeling, that's a really, really good indicator that you can probably add on something else. So why is this a good idea to wait to add on something else once you're competent or once you stop struggling to show up? To me, it comes down to time. If you can manage your time a lot better by not scrambling all throughout the day trying to figure out your routine, you're going to be able to continuously keep that focus up. And your mind will be clear. That's really the most important part. Your mind will be clear. If you still find it's hard to show up and practice your instrument while you're trying to go learn graphic design on the computer, then you now have to struggle in two different areas and you won't really have a clear mind. But if you have your instrument practice on autopilot to the point where you don't even have to force yourself to show up, now when you go learn that other thing, I think I just said graphic design, now when you go learn that other thing, it's not gonna really be that much of an effort. Okay, some other concepts to consider as far as adding these things on. I know I said one thing at a time, but I also understand we're human. So on some days or whenever you just kind of feel like it or you need a small break, try to dabble into that other thing that you're thinking about. So if you're like me, which apparently there's a lot of you, if you play guitar and piano and you need a break and you want to go learn some Japanese, do that. Just always remember that you want to continuously develop that focus in the first area, but try to just look at some other stuff in other areas too. Another concept is that every hobby or interest or passion or whatever has a valley. And what I mean by a valley is that there's a time, especially in the beginning, where you're not really enjoying the process. I think every hobby has a honeymoon phase where you're excited, everything's new, it's cool, it's fun, and then it drops off and reality hits, you're not good, you're not where you want to be, but you can see where you want to be. That can inspire you, but there are times where you just won't feel it. You kind of feel discouraged. Once you can get through the valley though, you get to a point where you unlock creativity. And I believe this is the point that hooks you onto a hobby. Once you can unlock creativity in that field, I like to call it the point of no return, or the point in which you know you like it or not. For example, in Japanese, yeah, I'm fluent now. Fluent, I don't like using that word, but I am. For a while, sentences, I had to think about them while I said them. And I call this the valley because it requires a lot of brain work. Same with watching anime or something with no subtitles. It required a lot of brain work. And it's kind of discouraging because you're like, man, I don't know if I'll ever get it. Maybe I started when I was too old, blah, blah, blah. But then once you can actually say sentences without thinking that much, and you can understand what you're watching without really paying attention to it like that, that's when the creativity comes up. And you can start to say your own custom sentences. You can start to look up whatever you really want, and you can get into things that you really like and not have to deal with the basics. That's the point of no return again. And I would say this is when you get through the valley, but it's important to know every hobby, in my opinion, has a valley. Japanese, and you know, a lot of you are musicians who watch my channel. You have the times where you have to learn the notes, you have to learn the scales, you have to do a lot of drills, dexterity work, things like that. It's not that fun sometimes. And if you can get through that and get to the creativity part, this is when the real fun starts. So just keep that valley in mind. I think almost everything has it. You just don't want to forget that it exists. Okay, next I would say is to stay present, but think long term. This is just another way to say stay focused on one thing at a time and use that momentum. But understand that eventually it's going to work out for your good, because you're going to actually have results in these areas rather than just having surface level results in a bunch of different things. The next one is that it's okay to quit if you don't like that thing. I know we often see quitting as a bad thing, but if you start learning guitar, for example, and you realize you're just not into it, after you get through the valley preferably, but once you realize you're not into it and you just want to drop it, that's totally okay. I've done this with several things. But don't be discouraged in thinking that you're doing something wrong or that you've given up and all that, whatever you hear on the internet. It's just not for you. So be okay with that. The next one is just to be kind to yourself. You know, even this video, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to do. There's a lot in your life you may have to change because you might already be into too many different things and now you have to scale it down to one, or you're still on social media a lot or YouTube a lot. That's fine. Just start to make these adjustments pretty soon, and don't be too harsh on yourself if it's not happening right away. And lastly, always keep in mind the 99 and 1% rule. It's kind of a little rule I made up in my last video. 99% of the work is what you do, and 1% of the work is stuff like this video or the courses or content that you're learning from. Always keep that in mind. That all being said, if you're looking to teach yourself a skill and you're tired of being lost on the computer with all these sources, I will have a link right here. I think right here. I don't know. If it's not right here, just click it. It's going to be somewhere on the screen. And I also have a playlist on managing multiple interests in general. It goes over removing things from your life, your belief systems, and it'll probably include this video too. Or if you don't want to watch any of that, you can get off the computer or the phone now and just get to work. That's what I would really prefer you to do, but it's your life. You can do what you want. Anyhow, if you found this helpful, you can leave a like. Helps the channel out a lot. And you can subscribe if you aren't subscribed yet. And if you want, you can hit the bell. You know, this is a lot to do, but it's all right there. You can just do it. And if you don't do any of that, I'm going to send this blue shell from Mario Kart to come see you. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.